Thank you, David and Ellen, for the opportunity to be on the panel, and I appreciate the honor to be with you this afternoon, talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and we've been working on through SAGES for a while. So I was asked for the program to talk about telementoring technologies of tomorrow, and we'll dive a bit into that. I do have a couple of disclosures. I work with both of these companies, both in image integration and recording, and also in this AV communication for telementoring. I don't receive anything directly from them, but my institution works with them as well, and so I manage that potential conflict by not advocating for any particular technology today. We're going to talk about principles. And this is really what I want to cover in my 15 minutes up here. We're going to talk about technology requirements. What do you need? And then some examples of that. I did want to take a step back a little bit, though, this afternoon and really talk a bit about this. Why are we even having this conversation about telementoring? What is the point and the purpose of this in our world? And I want you to think about something which you probably know in your heart, but you may have not thought about cognitively. And that is that as we are living in a world where the pace of change in surgery is absolutely unparalleled. Things have never changed this fast in the world of surgery. And in fact, as we sit and stand in this auditorium today, I want you to think about how fast all human knowledge in the world about medicine is doubling. Before World War I, it took about 100 years for human knowledge to double. After World War II, about 25 years. Take a guess today. 18 months. Every 18 months, all human knowledge about medicine is doubling. So what does that mean for surgeons like you and me? That means that we better be able to retool and retrain multiple times through our career if we want to stay abreast of our field. And to do that, you would hope that we would have some kind of curriculum to help support that. So we would identify a training need, we'd learn about that thing that we wanted to learn about, that technique or that technology. As a surgeon, we need to get some hands-on practice somewhere. We need to go somewhere, get familiar with the instrumentation, and practice that. And then ideally, we'd like to go back to our hospital, and we would like to have someone standing next to us, an expert who can mentor us through the early part of that learning curve. The problem is that when we do these educational events, most of the time, this is what we do to you. We send you back to your hospital, and you're alone, and your team is alone. And so if there's any complexity to what it is that we're trying to teach you, most of the time you're going to fall back to the old way that you were doing it. So we wanted to fill this gap. We used to do this with people, right? We would fly people around the country, have them in your operating room. I used to do that for a variety of different procedures. But that's not a scalable solution. And in today's day of legal and regulatory issues, that is an insurmountable problem in some places. We can't put live people into your OR. So we want to fill that gap with telementoring. And that's why we're having this discussion today. It's also why, during my president year in SAGES, we formed a telementoring task force to try to leverage the power of this society to move this field forward. And the job of this task force was to do a few things. First of all, define what it is that we're talking about. And actually, we've heard some terms kind of thrown around today. We've heard telemedicine and teleeducation and teleproctoring and telementoring. So as far as SAGES is concerned, and Nin mentioned this a bit in his talk, telementoring is three things, okay? It's telemedicine, first of all, is me providing care to an individual patient using audio-video technology so I can do that at a distance. So it's me caring for a patient. Telementoring is an educational event, and it has three elements to it. One is there's a known relationship between the mentor and the mentee, right? I can't be your mentor if we've never met before. And so there's a known relationship there. You know my capability, I know your capability. Second of all, it happens within an educational framework. We don't just turn this thing on and start having a chat. This is part of a comprehensive curriculum, an educational framework. And third, the mentee has an expertise to manage this problem independently. Might not be with the laparoscopic technique we're teaching, or it might not be with the tool that we're trying to introduce them to, but they can manage this problem independently. So if we disagree on something, or if the communication goes down, that patient is safe and cared for by a competent surgeon. That's how we define telementoring. So you heard about the Project 6 Summit, which is held 2 summers ago in Los Angeles. 50 stakeholders brought into a conference in order to map out what are the challenges in this area and how are we going to address them. And we divided things into what we called 5 opportunity buckets. So there were legal and regulatory opportunities, technology opportunities, communication and education opportunities, business model, and logistics. Those were the 5 areas that we thought we needed to work in. Last year, we published a white paper, which is the proceedings from this Project 6 Summit. So if you want to get an easy read, a quick snapshot of what we think about in the world of telementoring, this is a nice read to do that. Now, there are 5 more white papers coming out of this group on each one of those opportunity buckets. And the reason why I went through this background is I want to talk about the technology opportunity bucket. That's what we're going to use for our platform for this afternoon for talking about technology. And the reason why I want to focus on the technology and not on the toys themselves is that the toys change quickly, right? So things move fast in this world of AV. Think of this, right? 10 years ago, this was a BlackBerry. And I could do email and check my calendar, and that was about it, right? Now I've got a computer in my pocket. That's not a very long period of time. When we started doing telementoring through my program almost 11 years ago now, we developed a cart-based system. You kind of wheeled these things around. And then we moved into our own version of wearable technology, kind of taking stuff off the shelf and piecing it together. Just as we started to do that, this thing comes out and makes you look ridiculous, right? I'm strapping a webcam to my head, and now I got Google Glass. So we started looking at that. And now we're going even further, right? Oculus and these kinds of things. So the technology moves fast. So let's not talk exactly about the toy. Let's talk about the requirements that that toy needs to deliver to us to have a meaningful interaction in telementor. So the technology white paper that will be coming out of the working group identifies 5 technology principles that have to be addressed with the technology we're going to use. The first principle is regulatory, and this definitely applies to the US, but we have requirements that these devices have to meet in order to be able to be used for this interaction. So first of all, there's an FDA requirement. FDA controls the stuff that you put into your operating room. How do we know it's safe? And they actually classify that into 3 classes. Class 1 doesn't really touch anybody or the patient, so it has almost no risk, and we don't really care about that. That's the FDA's view. Class 3, that's something you're putting into a patient. Think hip prosthesis or pacing device. That's a whole nother level of regulation. We think that telementoring technology probably falls into the Class 2 category, but there's debate about that. HIPAA, okay? We need to protect your health information as a patient so that not just anybody can see that. And there's a physical protection around the devices that are being used. There's an administrative protection on both sides. How is this being administered? And there's a technical protection as well to keep people from accessing your medical information, your images that have no business doing that. So this is the first thing that has to be met. Second, data security. The broadcast has to be encrypted, and if you're going to store it, there has to be a storage management process that also keeps that secure. So again, let's think about some of the things we have in our pocket, right? This thing can broadcast. It's actually pretty darn sophisticated at doing that, right? So why don't we use FaceTime, Skype, Google Hangouts for doing this kind of communication? And you can, and we've seen some examples of that. Well, not all of this is ready to have this kind of communication. Turns out Apple's FaceTime does have end-to-end encryption and would meet the requirements for security. Google Hangouts, Skype, not so much. And so we need to know about those features when we're looking at our technology. Third requirement, it needs to be reliable and stable. We all hate it when the image freezes or it jitters or does those kinds of things while we're trying to have a teaching moment here. So the things that feed into that are bandwidth, latency, resolution, and frame rate. Bandwidth is how big of a pipe do I have to push my data through, okay? I think a lot of us kind of understand that. What bit rate can I get back and forth to you to get this information across? The bigger the pipe, the more meaningful interaction we can have. Latency, that's the time interval required for a package of data to travel between 2 points and back. So you do something in your OR, how long does it take me to see that and then broadcast something back to you? That's latency. Resolution, I think most surgeons that work in laparoscopy or endoscopy have this, they know this in their heart, right? We know that the more pixels that you can display per square centimeter on a screen, the higher the resolution of that image, the better it's going to be. And this is an area that's really progressed rapidly. So standard definition, about 480 pixels. High def, you can see the resolution there. Now we're talking 4K. We're seeing that come into our operating room, and we're even getting into 8K already. So the more pixels I can squeeze onto that screen, the better the resolution. And then there's frame rate, the number of images displayed per second. So this is also going to affect how sharp that image is and how jittery it is. And you might not be able to see this project too well, but on the left you have 30 frames per second, and that dune buggy is looking blurry. Same image on the right at 50 frames per second, I got a sharp image. We move pretty fast, our instruments do in surgery. We want the higher frame rate that we can get. Fourth principle, usability, okay? I'm a surgeon, I'm not a broadcast engineer for a network. I need to be able to sit down and use this thing without a lot of education about all of the technicalities. And there are things within that, telestration, control of my images, and recording. A few years ago, we did a survey of surgeon telementors, people who had experience at doing this, and asked them what were the important things that were requirements in order to have a meaningful telementoring experience. And one of the top things that they identified was telestration. They said, if I can't get telestration, I don't want to have this interaction. 100% of them said, I need telestration. I don't want to tell a point. I don't want to tell a shout. I want to be able to tell a straight, okay? Now, interestingly, as surgeons, we kind of forget sometimes that there are other experts that need to help us, particularly in the area of education. So when I first started working on our kind of kludgy wearable technology for telementoring, and we wanted to do telestration, I thought the holy grail was, I want that telestration on the actual surgeon's laparoscopic screen. So it's all in line of sight, and I can be right there with them. And so we were setting up things like this. The little iPad hanging from the monitor is the telestration screen. That is this setup, okay? That sets up dual task interference. We showed that setup to some education experts, and they said, why are you doing that? Why would you want that? So this is the ultimate of dual task interference, right? Texting and driving. You can do both, you just can't do both well. So what we were finding is that if we have this all in the line of sight, either the surgeon's trying to operate and I'm distracting them, or they're trying to pay attention to what I'm doing and not operating very well. And so what we studied and learned is that you need to separate these monitors by about 30 degrees. So this is our modern setup in the OR. Surgeon's monitor is in front of them, mentor monitor 30 degrees away. If we want to have a teaching moment, I stop you from operating. You change your attention to my mentor monitor. We're going to have a discussion. I'm going to confirm that you understand what it is that we just discussed, and then you're going to go back to operating, and I'm going to be quiet for a while. That's the interaction that we want to have. Now, the other thing is control. This schematic shows us all the things that we want to have control of potentially in an interaction. So the things in the gray circle in the middle, that's all the stuff in the OR that I, as a mentor beaming in, might want to have access to. Show me the fluoro image. Show me the laparoscopic image. Show me the Roon image. The stuff outside of that circle is all the things I might want to do with that, right? Two-way telestration, maybe record or image capture. And as a mentor, I want control of all of that stuff. I don't want to interrupt your operating room. I don't want to assume that anybody in your room has any expertise at this. I don't want to have someone go, you know what, go push that button so I can get the room view now. I need control. So everything that's outlined in that red outline, those are the things as a mentor I want to control, and I want access to all those sources in the room, and I don't want you to have to think about that as the surgeon. This platform actually does that pretty well. So we've done most of our telementoring into the community hospitals actually we've done all of our telementoring into community hospitals using this platform. You heard about this from Nin. This is the Visitor 1. So I have access to multiple inputs. The head of this thing pan, tilts, and zooms so I can look around the room, just like moving my head around. I don't have to bother you once we set this up in order to change my view and look at what I want to look at. Some other examples. So you may or may not know that the Da Vinci system has the ability to telementor across 2 surgeon consoles. And in fact, you can do more than that. You can take over control of the instruments, the mentor can from there. So that's a nice setup to give you this kind of control that we're looking at. Fifth and last principle in the SAGE's white paper is portability. We would like to have a form factor that we can easily move from place to place and case to case, and it has to be robust. It can't break down when we do that movement. So that's why a lot of people were interested in glass. For us, this wasn't ready for prime time. It just could not give us the meaningful interaction we were looking for, but man, the form factor was perfect. That's what we were looking for. This might be able to fill that gap, although now you're in this immersive environment. That might not be what we're looking for, but it's a technology that's very interesting. This I kind of take, again, going back to the Visitor 1, this is kind of middle of the road as far as portability, right? The shipping container alone for this is about $1,100. And then you have to ship it freight. You can't bring this as a carry-on. But I will tell you, it holds up to that pretty well, and it's pretty simple to set up once it's on the other side. So it's kind of middle of the road. InTouch, which is the company that makes that Visitor 1 and licenses it with Storz, has a portable version like this. We might be able to use something like that to increase the portability. This one, not so portable. But I'll come back to the idea of robotics in a second because I think there might be some interesting things in our future around that. And that's this guy. So I had to show something futuristic, right? Because that was the title of the talk. And we couldn't just talk about boring principles like bandwidth and frame rate. So this guy is Robonaut. Plus we're in Houston, my hometown, and we're not so far down the road from NASA where the Friday sing-off is going to be. And so this is Robonaut. Robonaut is a humanoid robot built to work on the space station. And this was meant to work in hostile environments, but to be able to do anything that a human can do, and in particular, to be able to pick up any instrument that was made for a human hand and use it. That was the principle behind Robonaut. So I had the opportunity to get introduced to the Robonaut team from NASA. We brought Robonaut up to our lab in Mighty, which is at the Houston Methodist Hospital, and we tried to teach it surgery. And so Robonaut's kind of cool. It has a heads-up display, which is 3D. You put on these gloves and what they call a dongle around your neck, and now it mimics your motion and your hand gestures. And those are the hands. It has 8.5 hands, by the way. Pretty darn big hand. So you can use instruments like that. So we've been trying to teach Robonaut to do surgery. Little video clip with some laparoscopic things. Now, I got to tell you, Robonaut's hands were meant to work with drills and things like that. It wasn't meant to work with fine instrumentation. So we're actually working with NASA to try to come up with a medical version that has some increased dexterity. But this is an intriguing telementoring platform because now Robonaut could be your assistant at your bedside. Give me an interaction with you, but maybe even let me participate in that procedure and do it at distance using a humanoid form factor. And if you paid attention and saw the version of Robonaut that's on the space station, it had no legs. The new version of Robonaut does. So portability, it'll just walk over to your OR. It can transport itself. So again, 5 technology specifications that we need to have. It's got to comply with the FDA. In the Project 6 Summit, they were saying Class 2. There's some controversy about that. Definitely has to be HIPAA compliant. Has to have encryption, so we have security of the transmission. Minimum bandwidth, 40 megabits per second was considered acceptable. Acceptable latency, 450 milliseconds. Minimum resolution, 480p. Pay attention, that's not high def. You don't have to have high def to have a meaningful interaction, but it can't be less than that resolution. Frame rate 15 frames per second. So I hope I covered technology requirements, gave you some examples, clarified what SAGE's definition is of telementoring, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.